This is the Baymaw Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today I'm with Dent and Elle Grover Fricks to conclude our series on the Psalms and offer a final bit of encouragement to carry with us into the future.
It's time to wrap this baby up and put her to bed.
That intro almost sounds like we're concluding the entire podcast, but I just mean a final bit of encouragement about the Psalms to carry with us into the future as we engage the Psalms later on.
Sure.
But that was a little bit too wordy, so.
What if we were just, we just like pulled a fast one on Marty and we're like, we ended the podcast while you weren't here.
Yeah, that's what happens.
That would be...
it'd be a shame because we already have so much stuff recorded for after this.
That's true. Okay, fine. That's the only reason we'll keep going.
All right, yep. Crisis averted.
Whew.
So let's just wrap up these Psalms then. We have done 10 episodes to date. We have covered the following Psalms. I made a list. Psalm 13 with Josh. How long, O Lord? Psalm 23 with Josh. And then again with Elle, which I think is still forthcoming. I haven't actually heard that one yet, but it's coming soon.
Yep.
We did Psalm 8 with Elle. Psalm 137 with Elle about killing babies.
No, that's not what it was really about. But
well,
thanks.
it involves that. We did
Mentions briefly.
Psalm 91, Psalm 139, Psalm 51 with Marty, all three of those. And then we did Psalm 32 together, Brent. And then we did Psalm 19 in a beautiful episode that was led by Brent Billings, ladies and gentlemen. It was fantastic.
An episode where we discovered it doesn't matter who is in charge of this podcast. We all have the capacity to go long.
It's going to go long. But this episode is going to be short. There, I said it.
Okay.
Again.
There it is.
We always say that, and then it always goes long. But truly, we have said a lot of material, a lot of things about these Psalms, and I have been, first of all, I just want to say, I have really loved doing this series, and I've been super, super grateful, folks, for the conversation partners that y'all have been and that Josh and Marty have been as well. It's pretty cool what we get to do, sitting around, talking Bible, talking Psalms, and I really, the more we go on, the more I see just the beautiful, awesome, unique things that each person is bringing to the table, and so I have really enjoyed it with you guys.
Yay!
And yeah, there's been so much good stuff, and I don't want to like retread all of it. We're just going to let that body of work stand for itself. But by way of a conclusion here, I do just want to, there are like kind of two main things that I want to highlight or recall. Both of them, I think we talked about in the intro, but then, you kind of talk about it ahead of time and you go through the whole series and then you can kind of reflect on it again in light of what actually came out. And then I have a few, I call them tasty treats. That's a TM, read Dent. I have a couple of modern sort of devotional poet type people. That devotional is the wrong word. Don't scratch that from the record. They would hate it if I said that. But they are poets who write in a psalmic manner from time to time, in a way that I really love. So I want to share a few things, and then maybe just from us, final encouragements about where to go from here with Psalms as Bema listeners continue on with their lives. But first, there is something very important that we must attend to before anything else is said. Brent Billings, what is the final verdict on Life Psalms in the Bema podcast? Were they discussed pre-Psalm series, and when, or do we still not know?
I'm on tenterhooks here.
Reed asked earlier today if we could start recording sooner, and I said no, because I would not be ready. I would not be ready because I had just woken up, because I was up late last night scouring the transcripts yet again, trying to find any reference to this. What remains is what I've only found before, the allusion I make to it near the beginning of episode 129. That's all I've got. Beyond that, I was searching Safaria and Chabad and anything to try to find any sort of reference to this in like Jewish practice, and I could not find anything at all. So I have nothing to offer here.
So what you're saying, therefore, is that this practice is a Marty psalm and trademarked original practice.
Sure. I don't know.
Which if it
I have no
were,
idea.
if it were, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
It's not a
We can
bad
roll
thing.
with new traditions. That's great.
I love the idea of it, actually. It's a great practice. I just was unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, and Marty insisted it's in the podcast, and some other people know about it that seem like they wouldn't know if it wasn't in the podcast, but I don't know how to find it. I've tried searching for everything. I've tried searching for Psalm 22 because we talk about, it could be Jesus doing a life psalm at the end. We don't even talk about it like in that passage on the cross. We talked about it, like I alluded to it, like, in the lead up to, like, is Peter like picking up on something that Jesus is saying? Is Jesus reciting it in the lead up to the cross? And that's my reference. But I don't know. I feel like it's got to be something where maybe we sort of talked about it on the podcast, but then we actually like elaborated on it in class. But I don't even know if the timeline works for that. Because I don't know. I don't remember when the class is in. I don't know.
I got it.
I have nothing.
I got it in the OG classes at WSU with Marty. That's
Definitely
where I picked it up in 2013. So
subtle flex. I like it. So this is what I'm putting on my notes then. Life Psalms, no, exclamation point. That's what I'm taking away from this.
I mean, it's not a definitive no, but I would have to listen back to every episode of the podcast because
would you do that? Could you find the time,
failing.
Please?
Just real fast. No problem. Not a busy guy at all, actually.
Well, I'm just messing by bringing this up. I just think it's a fun little mystery that has kind of woven its way through our Psalm series a little bit. But we can let it rest at that. Okay, so first thing that I want to recall by way of conclusion here, my little heading here says 1, done with decorum, which is to say, what I want to remind us about the Psalms is that they give us permission to not always have to be so deferential and civil and polite. Or so, maybe another word is self-conscious about the way that we present ourselves to God. The idea is speak what we feel, not what we ought to say.
Right.
So whether we are, and I think this cuts both ways, whether we are angry or whether we are exuberant, whether we are hurting or whether we're at peace, the idea I think that I get from the Psalms is that we ought to speak sincerely and not try to put on a show. And I also just want to remind us that putting on a show can go both ways. It's not just the thanks and praise and positive stuff that can be insincere. I think maybe that's where my brain tends to go, of somebody being like falsely, schmaltzy and sentimental. But you can also be disingenuous or melodramatic with various kinds of discontent, right? Like the ironic hipster kid that's just poking holes in everything. And so I want us to hear, yes, we ought to say what it is that we feel, not what we ought to say. But the idea is also not like we're not trying to be edgy for the sake of being edgy or provocative simply for its own sake.
Right.
Another thing I want to point out is that sometimes what we feel is precisely not what we would like to say. Because sometimes what we feel is very uncomfortable for us. And this also cuts both ways. Some of us, we don't know what to do with the anger or the doubt that is inside us. But there are others of us who don't know what to do with the joy and the gratitude that are welling up within and wanting to overflow. And I guess we're pretty good at pressing all kinds of things down. And I think the Psalms can help us bring those out. And so I think different people need different Psalms to bring out in them whatever uncomfortable thing is there. And so some of us who are uncomfortable with confusion or disappointment with God, maybe we've been raised in a way that's you're not supposed to feel this way, or you're not supposed to voice it. We need things like Psalm 13. We did that episode, How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Or even thinking about the uncomfy part of Psalm 139 that we talked about Do I not hate those who hate you? I hate them with complete hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there is a part of us that actually just is that before we get to the value judgment. It just is there and it needs to be voiced. And this is because this is, this is holy scripture. I think it kind of gives us permission. Okay, if you're feeling this, you can say this. Or Elle, thinking about our, I don't want to call it the baby killing episode, but that episode, happy is the one who seizes, your infants and throws them against the rocks. But I also, again, think some of us are very uncomfortable we're actually we're very comfortable in that range.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people, again, I just want to highlight this because I suspect that there are a lot of people, maybe even deconstructors, so-called, who are actually uncomfy with the celebration, the praise, the kind of uninhibited, like, yes, God, exclamation point. And I was thinking about Psalm 100. Like, if I was going to do another episode, maybe I would do Psalm 100 that is, shout to the Lord. How does it go? It's the song. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. This is another great church song. And enter his courts with praise. And some of us need that to stretch us and get in touch with that thing in us that is like wanting to give thanks. And so I think the thing is, my overall point here is wherever we're at, and also whatever we maybe are uncomfortable with, we can let the Psalms teach us to let like the whole thing like come out. The whole thing can be put before God just as it is, and it helps us become more vulnerable. I don't know if you feel this, but like I'm a person who is the idea of just going totally like unfiltered with an expression of joy is hard for me. Like, this is why I don't dance at wedding receptions, because I feel so self-conscious, right?
Beyonce recently wrote a song charting very high, complaining about you specifically.
And she should. Because here's the thing, Beyonce should be fed up with people like me because I have a point of growth here. But I feel myself, it is a kind of exposure when it's like, oh, I'm going to,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that goes with like both the performativeness or the not saying anything at all. Both sides, as far as it seems to me, are stemming from the same spot, which is a kind of fear of being seen or a desire to control how we're seen. And so we don't bring our joy fully out, whether that's to God or other people, because we want to control the narrative, but we also don't bring our pain fully out. And of course, if all of our theology says that God is omniscient, that's all dumb anyway, right?
Totally.
And hopefully there's something about that and saying, maybe there's also a fear of losing control of ourselves, right? Like maybe I'll just turn into one of those cringy, happy clappy Christians if I allow myself to do that. Or maybe I'll get lost in my pain and my anger if I pull it out from under the bed. And when we do that with God, not just, practicing catharsis on our own, it's a statement of trust that God is big enough to handle all of the things that we're bringing to him, and that he has the ability not just to hear it, but to work with us through it. And so the practice of returning to the Psalms and going through the Psalms creates that space. Ding, ding, ding. Creates the space for all sorts of things to happen. As we work through them, whether you're vibing with that particular psalm or not, asking the question, why is it that I think shouting for joy is gauche,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I really resonate with this part of this psalm. That's awesome. Why don't I resonate with this other part of the psalm? Lots of opportunity for reflection.
I'm really glad you brought up the thing about trust. I remember feeling this. I think I talked about this in the intro episode. When I was in high school, maybe, there was the Proverbs verse that was, a fool gives full vent to his anger. And that was like my thing, right? Because you can't lose control. And this fear that, because I came from some angry places, in my family history. So I was afraid that would consume me. But I think it's a great point about how it is an act of trust to say, okay, I'm going to like lean into this because this is who I am. This is what's going on with me right now. There's no sense hiding. So you also, I think you also make a good point about we can't let our conceptions of God's omniscience get in the way of needing to just honestly and fully express where we're at.
Yep. Which we would hopefully in other relationships too, right? That's a pretty intuitive thing about relationship that, yeah, my spouse probably knows how I feel because of all the body language I'm putting out and the way I said good morning or whatever. And yet how much more helpful in our relationship and the strength of that relationship to say, hey, this is how I'm doing and this is what it's about.
Right.
I think dovetails nicely with this sentiment, with these ideas. At the very beginning of your series, y'all
is a great word. It's really practical actually. Because otherwise, we have you guyses or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I am in favor. I have Southern heritage in my family, but aside from that, I think people all over, there is a really good case to be made for introducing y'all into the lexicon.
Absolutely.
I'm 100% on board.
We need a second person neutral plural. Anyway, at the beginning of the series, you guys talked about what is poetry, and there is a specific answer from an academic lens, which of course is not the only lens. But when we talk about what is Hebrew poetry, that I think helps continue to crack open what we're talking about a little bit. And there's three main features of Hebrew poetry. The first one is it has more of the structures of Near Eastern poetry. So more chiasms, more parallelisms, more of those kinds of setups, more of recurring motifs that sometimes you get in poetic prose, but isn't always there. Not every chapter of Torah or Tanakh has a chiasm. Shocking, though that might be.
I mean,
a whole bunch of Bema listeners just turned off right there. They just hit stop.
You just haven't found it yet. That's all it is.
Sure. We have an eternity to find that together. How wonderful that will be. Amen. The second component is brevity. Like a bunch of grammatical structures get cut out. Before we started recording, you shared a poem that your friend wrote in college.
Oh no, this was third grade.
Third grade, that's better. Okay,
which is why it's phenomenal that it's stuck with me for 32 years.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing that here? Do you think you'd mind?
No, not at all. Brian Coble, this one goes out to you. If you're listening, I think you're an eye doctor. Anyway, it's been a long time. Get a hold of me because I'm about to share your third grade name poem. And it goes like this. Brian Coble is so noble. He is small, but not like a ball.
Incredible. I'm still, my soul's delighted by this. I'm pretty sure my mom has my third grade poetry lying around too, and she is a listener. So now I'm a little bit in fear of my own things being resurrected.
Do you think we could get her to send us some and we could share a little bit?
Yeah, we're going to have to do a follow-up episode for sure.
I am sure that she would delight to do that. I'm remembering like poems about soccer and vegetables is what's coming to mind. Anyway, the point is, in that poem, if you were going to make it more Hebrew, it would be like small, not ball, right? You would drop the like, you would drop the is even. I mean, you always do that in Hebrew, but you would drop the so. It would just come down to its main component elements with an eye toward that structure. All the articles, all the normal things or prefixes get in the way of what they're trying to do. If you're familiar with French romantic poetry and French art songs, it's much more like that than like German romantic poetry and German art songs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I get it.
Oh, I'm sure you've read Goethe or something at some point.
Who knows?
Shout out to people following along. And it's okay if that doesn't, never mind. The last component, though, is special vocabulary. So in other places, we'll just have like one word for a while, and then in our poetic sections, we might have a whole bunch of different ones, and you can find that and pick up on it kind of intuitively if you're going through a concordance to be like, oh, this only turns up in the Psalms and Job. Like, then it's probably a poetic word. It's not even like a dating thing. It's just a genre thing. So to me, that's helpful and instructive when we're thinking about accessing parts of our emotions that might feel like they're not great for the community, which is ironic because these are designed for community use. To me, knowing that kind of vocabulary, like it doesn't have to be performative. It doesn't have to follow a particular formula, right? With the grammar component. When the churches that I was part of made us practice like this formula for prayer where you had to start with thanksgiving and then adoration and then confession. And then I can never remember what the O was for, but mixed taco as an acronym. Like none of that is important in the Psalms, right? You might pick up on some patterns, like he preaches to himself at the end sometimes. You know, he processes all the things and then he doesn't just leave it there. He meets it with some truth. And so you can note that, but we don't necessarily have to be constrained by those things, constrained by like, oh, Lord, our God, I know that you have given me everything that I need in accordance with your sovereign will, to which I absolutely am content with. And yet, though you have been so good to me, still, if it be within your will, I, just maybe this, but probably not. All of that stuff ends up just as being as performative as, the other things that we can roll our eyes at, which...
Yeah.
That's really the national sport is eye rolling. But then also that last piece of special vocabulary can be really nice in the reading of Psalms and the reading of other poetry, because again, with like I'll speak for myself, I often withdraw from anything that feels too saccharine specifically. It's like, oh, not that. And yet there can be space in which we can use all of those words, right? There is truthfulness in them to say things like, my soul yearns. You probably wouldn't say in your community group, how are you doing, Jill? Well, my soul has been yearning. Let me tell you. Maybe that's your personality. I probably wouldn't think too much if somebody said that to me, but most of the time we don't allow ourselves to say those kinds of things. And so accessing even the words that match our deep anguish, or which even nobody says, I'm feeling anguished today. We need places that help put words to the rich inner experience that we have been given, made in the image of God.
That reminds me of, one of the kind of side projects we've had through the series has been talking about orientation, disorientation, new orientation. And while those things can be helpful categories, we've also seen week after week, this kind of is that, but it's also kind of this other thing, and it doesn't have to play nicely by the formula.
Right. And how weird would it be if you were praying that way? Like, Lord, here's my prayer of orientation.
Right.
You are in the heavens. I am on the earth.
And now I am shifting to disorientation.
Yes. Yeah. But why are you so far from me? Etc. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's my thing about what Hebrew poetry is. If you've been, shout out to academic folks who are like, emotions, whatever. And yet you do jive with trying to find, like, is this poetry? Is Genesis 1 poetry? Is Genesis 2 poetry? Etc. You can look out for those things. Might require picking up some Hebrew along the way. So, bummer.
One, structures, brevity, special vocab.
Yep.
Those three things.
You got it.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. The next thing that I want to get to is in thinking about how we express in all of these different kinds of ways. I want to point out this is kind of dovetailing with the first, but this is the second overall thing, is that while the Psalms are about expression, they are not, I don't think, about expression simply for its own sake. And what I mean is this, that the Psalms are always either reveling in, or they're boxing with, or they're just journeying around and away from and toward God. God is the central object in the mind of the psalmist. And I've wondered if maybe the challenge of the Psalms for some of us post-Enlightenment science kids is less about the emotions themselves, although maybe that's difficult, and more just about the godness of them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like they are doggedly determined to keep all of these experiences, this whole gamut, whatever it is connected to God. So good days, they're not just a stroke of luck. Calamities, it's not just bad fortune. As our favorite Sunday school song says, which cribs from Psalm 118, this is the day that the Lord has made. Which day? Each day. When it's good, let us rejoice and be glad. But when it's bad, like, where are you? So we don't just get, I was thinking of a few examples. We don't just get nature is cool. We get the Lord wraps himself in light as with a garment, and he stretches out the heavens like a tent and lays the beams of his upper chambers on their waters. That's from Psalm 104. And it's not just, I am sad. It is, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? We can come back to Psalm 13, but it's just such a classic. It's so great. And it's not even just, I was thinking about our episode, Elle, on Psalm 8. It's not just abstract thoughts on the nature of being sometimes. It's when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, or human beings that you care for them? So thinking about the nature of man is actually just a function of thinking about man as a created thing by God. It's not just in a vacuum. You know what I'm saying? And this is what I love about the Psalms, is that they are just so very first person. There are so many first person pronouns, I and my, and they often are using the name you for God. And it kind of, I just imagine it sort of forces us to the table with God, where if we're going to read or pray the Psalms as they're written, we're kind of forced to the table to sit down with God to either we're going to talk, or we're going to catch up, or we're going to argue, but we are going to be there with God, whether it's good, bad, joy, pain. God is the one that we are reckoning with.
That's so good. I love this for so many reasons. I love your big point that it's not just expression for the sake of expression, because that just can turn into a tornado of unhealth and entitlement, right? Being like, well, I need to have space to say who I am and what I'm going through. And it's like, yes, but that's not the end of the point in the story, and that's not the practice that that is life-giving ultimately, just like saying my thing. From a scientific perspective, every time we rehearse a story, we're cementing that story further in our brain. So when we're like, I'm just getting it out of my system, we're also retelling ourselves a story that's getting strengthened in our memory. And so the practice in the Psalms of saying, this is what I'm going through, this sucks in all these different ways, and I wish that would happen. But then, as we've seen, that reorientation little component does come in, like Psalm 4. He's talking about, how long shall my honor be turned to shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? But then at the end, after he's been yelling for 7 verses, he says the reorientation piece, in peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And I remember this pivot. I was a teenager, and I'd write out like maybe 3 big college ruled pages at a time of my angsty teenage prayers. And I remember being like, this process of like telling God about my stuff is supposed to make me feel better. And at the end, I feel like more depressed and anxious. What's going on? And eventually I figured out I wasn't like doing any of the preaching to myself component. I wasn't reminding myself of any of the things, any of the handholds about who God was. I was just like, okay, people have told me that I should bring all my stuff to God. So here I go. And then I was like thought spiraling on my own issues without utilizing a structure to remind me to come back to that reorientation. What are the things I know for sure? What are the things about God that do remain constant even through all my stuff? Which is why praying through the Psalms can be so helpful, because you can write out the Psalm on one half of the page, and then you can pray responsively on the other half of the page. And then you have the security blanket, at least for me, that you will end 90% of the time with some reorientation that will help you resettle your soul back into its refuge, not just leave you out on the plane being like, okay, I've prayed that God would show up.
Yeah.
Looking around, where'd he go?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that happens when we remember that the Psalms are dialogic like this. It's not just it's not a monologue. I'm not just expressing, right? Is that the one to whom we are speaking may speak back,
Right.
and we have to then be accountable to that. Maybe we are affirmed and comforted. Maybe we are actually confronted. No matter which way we are praying or praising, there is I think, and I hope this is obvious. I don't mean that you hear a voice from the sky necessarily, but as much as praying is speaking, and it is also listening. And the Psalms invite, I think, God to respond. So just keeping that in mind.
Right. And that's only a practice if you make it a practice. Like, I wasn't raised with that being a practice. It is now most of the time.
Most?
When I make space and time for it.
Sometimes it's just ranting. I mean, sometimes that's how I am.
Sure. But the times that you do make space, I do typically feel that there's some response that does reorient me in some way. And yes, sometimes it's a little, God doesn't always just speak in big booming statements of comfort or exhortation. Sometimes it's a little sideways. If you applied that to this situation type thing. Anyway, so yeah, keeping that as a practice is also essential. Or if you are staunchly against any kind of divine revelation of any sort, find it in the text. Keep reading until you find something that speaks to you, and that's perfectly good.
And now I'm going to go outside the text. Before we get to the final bit here where we wrap up, because I don't know, maybe some people will like this, maybe they won't. I'm going to do it because I like it. I got a few poets on my mind who I have enjoyed for quite a while, and I have been revisiting some of them more lately. Shout out to the Festival of Faith and Writing. I went with my friend Derek, who was on the pod last year sometime, to listen to some of these writers. And I just wanted to share, we don't necessarily have to have a discussion about it. We can, but I just wanted to share a few things that are more contemporary from people who are still doing this practice now. They're still engaging psalmically in poetry with God. And so the first one, I just want to read a stanza. This is from a guy named Christian Wyman, who teaches at Yale, and he is a poet, and he is awesome. Christian Wyman wrote a book called My Bright Abyss, which was this really cool memoir that was kind of a mixing of kind of prose and poetry, like just woven with each other, after he was diagnosed with cancer and was like going through that. And the beginning of his book begins with this stanza that I think about a lot, and it goes like this. My God, my bright abyss, into which all my longing will not go. Once more I come to the edge of all I know, and believing nothing, believe in this. And then there's a colon, and it ends there, and it's kind of this unfinished thing. And this is the poetry of a guy who is it is my God, and I can't get all of my longing to go into it like I maybe want to. The wrestling match of trying to make God one's beloved as God ought to be. And it's like I come to the point where I don't know anything more, and this is what I believe in, I don't necessarily know what that is. And then he writes this whole memoir as like a kind of a answer to that question. But I love that, just those little 4 lines. I think about it all the time. And then a totally different tone. Also, if you guys want to comment on any of this, just interrupt me and pop in. But the next one is from a very different poet. His name is Kaveh Akbar. And I actually saw Kaveh and Christian have a dialogue. They did like a conversation for an hour on spirituality and language. And it was like watching Inside Out. Do you guys know the movie?
Yeah.
Christian Wyman is like very just serious. He doesn't move a lot. His words are very measured. He's from Texas. He was like, grew up Baptist and then became an atheist for a long time and then came back to God. And Kaveh was born in Iran and was raised Muslim and grew up like praying in Farsi. And now they're both kind of circling around the same thing, which is God, but in like their personalities, Kaveh is like, he's like, what's her name? Leslie Knope.
Yes.
What's her name? Amy
Poehler.
Poehler. Thank you. Amy Poehler. And he's just like so excited. And he's like just chomping at the bit all the time and he's moving all the time and he wants to say what he's very excited about. He wrote a poem called "Despite My Best Efforts, Even My Prayers Have Turned into Threats." And it starts like this. He says, "Holy Father, I can't pretend I'm not afraid to see you again, but I'll say that when the time comes, I believe my courage will expand like a sponge cowboy in water." And I love that because I feel like it kind of, I feel that like I'm going to confront God. I'm afraid to, and then I expand, but I'm just like a cowboy. I'm going to be brave and tough, but I'm just a sponge cowboy in water. And there's something that is like, that is both like bravado and like, sheepishness at the same time that I sometimes feel with God.
I love from that poem because you sent them ahead of time in your notes, which I only discovered like 20 minutes before we started recording. That's my sin. Plus, my sins were practically devotional. 2 peaches stolen from the bodega. That's so good. I love it. Okay, now you can continue.
That's from a collection called Pilgrim Bell. And then this is a guy named Franz Wright, who wrote I think this was a Pulitzer Prize-winning collection called Walking to Martha's Vineyard. And this poem called "The Only Animal." It's the final poem in the collection, and this is just the final couple of stanzas from it. He says, "You gave me in secret one thing to perceive, the tall, blue, starry strangeness of being here at all. You gave us each in secret something to perceive. Furless, upright, my banished and experimental child, you said, though your own heart condemn you, I do not condemn you."
It's good stuff.
Which there's a whole poem that comes before that, but it ends with, Franz Wright hearing the response of God to himself. Which I think can also be a good, creative, imaginative psalmic exercise. If not only because one of the reasons why I share these poems is to encourage people to engage in the practice your own self. You don't have to be a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, of course, but just to engage pen to paper, thought to paper, and even as a part of that, what would God say back to me? This is an exercise we do at the end of every semester is, what did God see? Is a way of doing kind of an evaluation of our ministry. When God looked at whatever was happening, what did God see? Because it's different than what we see. And just trying to get into that frame of mind and writing back to yourself. So I just wanted to share those. People can run with them, go buy their books, go read their poetry. They're really great.
Yeah.
But do you guys have any? Like, do you have any artists or, writers, poets, songwriters who kind of get into this mode for you?
Can you say more about get into this mode for you?
Yeah, like who are, what I mean is, who capture this sort of first person experience with God that they are trying to convey on the page or through a song.
Sure. Yeah, I have three thoughts. One is I am a big fan of worship music that doesn't suck, and also some worship music that kind of does.
Can you name a few of the ones, maybe the ones that don't suck? Say that.
I'm right. So, I mean, what I mean by that is like sometimes you still have a special place in your heart when you hear like an old 90s worship song or whatever. And if you really think about what the words are saying, maybe you're like, oh, geez Louise, what are we doing here? But still, it can unlock a memory or an old part of yourself and bring you back to the faithfulness of God that you were celebrating at that time. And that can be a beautiful practice. So that's whatever that is for everybody else out there. Going back to a time in your life when your faith felt really strong and joyful and simple or passionate, whatever that looks like for you. I'm a member of my local community choir, which I live in a college town or adjacent to 2 college towns. So we've got a nice caliber going, which I know can be hard to find sometimes, but I really like it as a practice that helps me to inhabit poetry, right? Because that's what choral pieces are, is just long pieces of poetry set to beautiful music. And when you're rehearsing it and singing it over and over and over, and making gorgeous music together that you're channeling through one person who's leading everybody, and the emotional depth of the music, right? A good conductor isn't just like 1, 2, 3, 4. They're helping you connect with something. To me, that's a practice because I don't get to like pick the poetry we're singing. But whether it's excellent classical music where you're getting to sing incredible truths about who God is, even if it's in Latin or whatever. Or we did a highlight on modern poetry a couple months ago, and getting to inhabit that kind of music is really helpful for me. And I connect with unexpected things, maybe that at first I'm like, whatever, seems not quite my thing. But when you inhabit it for a while, it can surprise you. When I think about first person psalm like poetry that cracks something open for me personally, this is like the most Enneagram 8 poem that I can think of, which is what I am. But it's also, it just strikes at my soul every time. One of my absolute favorites, Ulysses by Tennyson. And I know people can like be rude about Tennyson just making everything pretty, but like, what's wrong with prettiness? Let's get over ourselves. But anyway, it's told from the perspective of Ulysses. If you know the saga, he completes his first quest, he comes back home, and then he decides to go back out to sea once more. And even though it's not like blatantly about God and spirituality, you've got to like have your eyes closed to miss that illusion. For me, it's very much about faith and spirituality. It says, yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world whose margins fade forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rest unburnished, not to shine in use. As though to breathe were life, life piled upon life were all too little. It goes on, but very, very Enneagram 8, very speaks to me. And like lots of people would say, yes, to breathe is life. Read some Buddhism, man. Like find some rest, find some stillness. And of course, there's wisdom in that too. But I write that one out every year. It's part of one of my birthday practices. And I really enjoy it. You can find it on Poetry Foundation. And then worship music that doesn't suck. This is like, where to begin the list? King's Kaleidoscope, Citizens, United Pursuit, Will Reagan, Tekoa. There's once you start getting into that world, and Josh Garrels and Spotify or whoever you listen to, they'll start throwing you more people. So listening to a set, usually I'll make like a set for a season, sometimes even a month if I'm really in the zone. And then my kids learn the music too, and that's cute. Or at least my 3-year-old does. My 18-month-old just kind of dances to whatever. But making it part of a time, and then I can return to that time later. And that's a beautiful practice too. I think when you inhabit the Psalms, they can become like time markers of, oh, I remember when God spoke to me through this Psalm, and it was at this particular moment. And then at the end of your life, you have this beautiful road map through this ancient book that reminds you of all these places where God showed up for you or comforted you or challenged you, right? And that's something to do in the whole text, but it's very easy to do in the Psalms. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered that question.
You did super well. That's a great response. There's lots of good stuff in there for people to track down. Brent, anything come to mind for you?
Well, I will not be giving a list of the artists that I like because
Too personal.
I'm too afraid of the judgment that might come. I don't know. What's weird is I think a lot of most of the things that speak to me in this way are songs. And a lot of times it's not even necessarily the words behind them. Not that I think the words are really meaningful to me in a lot of cases, but most of the time what ends up really grabbing hold of my soul and taking me on some kind of a journey is a particular sound that accompanies the words. And maybe one of the earliest examples of this popular worship song in churches for a long time, even to today probably, is Revelation song. And the way we did this at my church 20 years ago just really captured this. Like the words on their own are powerful and they're familiar. But then the way the music went with it, the way the singers engaged it, the way the dynamics of the song worked, the way the drummer hit certain things. And like I've tried to have I've had various levels of influence with worship bands as I've worked in churches and like, hey, what if you guys did this on this part? I've tried to recreate it and I've never been able to recreate that power. No recorded version of this song comes anywhere close to like what happened. And it wasn't like a one-time thing. Like there've been times where songs that I just absolutely do not like, have no affection for whatsoever. And then there's this one moment where it just happens to hit right. But Revelation song wasn't like that. Like every time this band did it, 20 years ago, week after week, month after month, year after year, like it was always that powerful. But then I've never heard any other version that captures it in the same way. And, there's just a lot of that where it's like this version of this song, like is the right combination of words and sounds. And it just carries me to this transcendent place where everything else kind of melts away and I get lost for a moment. And I don't know if it's like God is holding me or I'm jumping around in a field with God or however you want to look at it. Like there's various types of emotions that accompany each type of song. But yeah, I think that's how it works for me.
Well, now we know what to play at your funeral, so I'm ready.
No, I already have a funeral song.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I Saw the Light by David Crowder, and I want everyone to do a full-on hoedown.
That sounds amazing. Sign me up. Die first.
Yeah. And I also recently, not even a year ago, I was in Oklahoma, and I was visiting a church that I'd never been to before, heard a song that I'd never heard before, and it was in the wake of this tragedy that I was aware of. And I just had these people on my heart. And I was listening to this song and the words of the song, like completely unintentionally and outside of what was happening, seemed to line up with this experience. And like in the moment, I was just absolutely weeping because I was like, how could these people who have been through this sing this song? Like this would be impossible if they were here. Like it was just so devastating. And then after the fact, I was so angry about it. I'm like, how can anyone sing this song when these types of things are happening? So that was like a weird song experience that I'd never had before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I love listening outside of genre. There's an element of surprise that you said, because something can sweep you off your feet and surprise you and connect with something. There's sorry, I promise we're finishing read. There's a recording where Maverick City Music goes to Miami-Dade Correctional Facility and they lead like a ton of prisoners. Like it's the biggest prison concert they had, and singing Bless Me, which is this just audacious, very Jacob-esque request that God bless us because that's who God is, not because of how great we are. And just seeing, hundreds of prisoners sing that, trusting in who God is rather than, it's just so good. So good. You can find it on YouTube. It's incredible. And it always moves me. So get what you're talking about. A context makes things even more light filled.
Okay. So I promised a short episode, which clearly we're going to deliver.
Clearly.
But as we come now to the final bit, I got 2 questions for each of you that you can answer in any order that you like. One, anything from the series that has struck you as we have gone through psalm by psalm, and then any final encouragement for listeners going forward with the psalms. What do we do with the psalms from here?
For me, so many of these psalms, as we've tried to categorize them in this orientation, disorientation, orientation idea, I think so many times the psalmist is coming to the table with an idea of what they want to express, and then some other thing breaks through. Whether they're trying to get into new orientation, but there's this disorientation that's holding on to them, or whether they really just want to let it fly, just disorient, break everything apart, but then this other idea breaks in at the end, or whatever, however you want to look at it. The expression of these things brings to light the inner parts of our soul, but also allows us to be open to some new orientation that we weren't expecting or whatever.
I liked the reminder that the Psalms are deserving of study, that study belongs to all genre, because I think I definitely entered it with the water skiing framework of don't ruin it too much, you guys. Just enjoy the good stuff, and if there's stuff you don't jive with, just move on. It's fine. And being no, just like with the rest of the Bible, there's always beautiful things that come out more when we take the time to find it. So I enjoyed that. And then for final encouragement, twofold. One, I think, like we talked about a second ago with the roadmap of our lives and how things become pillars, things become memorial stones for us. Trust in that process and engage with that process, even if it's not in the Psalms, because it is beautiful. Second, Psalms are a cool thing to put in your home. They're short, they're little. The Dent household has beautiful prayers on the walls from Every Moment Holy, I think.
Yep.
And just making your home, a beautiful reminder on its own of who God is and who you are and what the world is about, and what you're doing here is a beautiful practice. I was reminded of that listening to you guys talk about amulets and the amulet prayer psalm. Because Robert Alter called it that, because we've found all of these amulets that have that psalm written on them.
I think that is so cool. I think that is such a cool find.
Yes. I'll have to give Brent the link to look at some of them. And maybe it was a sus thing, God doesn't keep me safe. This amulet does. But maybe it was just a reminder, a physicalized, tangible reminder, more similar to maybe what we have in Catholicism than what we have in Protestantism, of this thing is a physicalized representation of the fact that I'm protected. And God keeps me in his refuge. So having physicalized things in your home can help with that.
Yeah.
And then the last encouragement, Reed touched on this earlier, but put your own pen to paper. Sometimes there's kind of a gulf in the spectrum between people who are why would I ever use liturgy? Why would I ever read this poem when I could just say what's on my mind? That's too constraining. I'm a little bit on that side, though. I really like poetry and other people's work in praying the Psalms. But if you're somewhere in between, or you like the idea of branching out, creating is an important part of the learning process, right? You can learn something 4 times, but if you create something with it, you're way more likely to remember it. So you could do okay, what would my Psalm 8 look like? And you can write out Psalm 8 and then you can use it as a format structure. Oh, here's the spot where David's talking about his sin. What would that look like for me? And now he says something reorienting. I can do that for me. So especially if you're a really study bent person who wants to engage academically, you can enjoy the categorizing part and then stretch yourself by writing something similar that is applicable for you. So, experiment. There's a wide spiritual frontier out there just waiting for us to explore, to try and to fail and to make incredible discoveries. So
for sure.
Get out there.
Thank you. That's great encouragement. Great thoughts. The only thing that I would add to any of that is I was thinking specifically of people who kind of don't have a prayer life or who struggle to have a prayer life, which there's no judgment about that. I'm just for people who find themselves in that place. My encouragement would just be let the Psalms become your prayer life for a little while. And maybe part of that is just thinking honestly, assessing some of the stuff we were talking about earlier in the episode. Where do I find myself? What am I comfortable with and uncomfortable with? But what is it within me that I need to orient around God in the way that the psalmists do? What do I need? What experiences need to be connected to God and in prayer, and to let the Psalms be that for you? And do it, regularly. Do it every day. Do it every day for a month and see what happens. But just start reading them, start voicing them, start praying them.
Yep. And we're connecting with a long and beautiful tradition of spiritual ancestors when we do that. So
for sure,
it's not just you feeling dumb alone in your room. You're feeling dumb with a great cloud of witnesses.
So perfect.
We should change the name of the episode, Brent, to Feeling Dumb with a Great Cloud of Witnesses.
The whole episode, I've been trying to think, what are we saying that's going to be better than conclusion? And I think we have a few options.
I love to serve.
It has been a great series, though. This is one of those things where many people have been shocked that we covered the entirety of the Psalms in a single episode back in session 2. And, the yearning. People have been yearning. Their souls have been yearning for more Psalms.
Way to use that special vocabulary.
People don't say that word. They don't say that word anymore, Brent.
I heard that, but yeah. Yeah, but it's good. It fills in, and even 10 episodes, we covered a lot of stuff, but there's still so many other Psalms to explore. So it leaves a lot on the table for people, but also gives people some good material to work with and some good ways to move forward if they don't know how to engage the Psalms. So I think it was a very valuable use of our time. I like it.
Yay.
Great.
All right. Well, we do have quite a few show notes for this episode. You can find those in your podcast app or at BehemothDiscipleship.com. And as well as events that are coming up, and the contact page is the best way to get in touch with us, so you can use that. But thanks for joining us on the Behemoth Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.
Test. Okay.
Check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2, 3. It's much cooler in theater. You get to practice part of your monologue when you're doing your mic checks. And I think that we should do poetry or text reading for our mic checks instead.
Big brown bug, bit a big black bear. Here's a fun fact about me. I have a friend named Mark Lambert, and his dad, his name is Beth and Mike Lambert. And Mike was the national champion auctioneer for a number of years running, and had a whole school that he ran for auctioneers, and had a series of VHS tapes in the 80s about auctioneering that were quite popular. And so he had this whole vocal warm-up that we watched part of the tape one time, and he was going through the the vocal, loosen up the lips and all of that, tip of the tongue, teeth in the lips.
Yes. Lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. Shakespeare has a vocal warm-up, actually, which has to do with dragons. So that's always fun. Tattooing.
That's cool.
What to do to die today in a minute or two to do. A distinctly difficult thing to say and harder to still to do. It beats a tattoo at 20 to 2. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, and the dragon will come when he hears the drum in a minute or two to do today in a minute or two to 2. There you go.
Wow. Please tell me that you were recording that.
Yep.
Yes.
You've now been christened as theater kids. You're welcome.
That's impressive.
I mean, it's fun.
How long has it been since you said that?
You know, in an official setting, 14 years, maybe. I don't know. To my husband to annoy him or try to seem impressive in some way, probably relatively recently, though I don't remember.
Well, I'll one up you. And I was just actually talking with a student this morning, and somehow we got on the subject of my fourth grade class, or third grade class, because I transferred schools in the middle of the school year.
Okay.
And my teacher tried to set me up with some friends. One of them, his name was Brian Coble. And we had a project where we had to write a poem using our name.
Nice.
And I don't remember my poem at all, but I will never forget Brian's poem. And it went as follows. Brian Coble is so noble. He is small, but not like a ball.
So
that's basically the same as remembering what you just did.
Pretty close. That's delightful. I picked up Orange and Other Poems by Wendy Cope this weekend when I was in Spokane. And she's got this great book that's like called Refrigerator Magnets. And as she gets to word, it's a short poem. And I wish I memorized it, but I just read it. As she gets toward the end, like the letters don't appear anymore because whenever you're trying to put something on a refrigerator, you run out of E's or whatever. Mm-hmm. It just delights me and reminds me of that.
I like that.
Well, my vocal warm-up falls in between that. It's 1 Week by Bare Naked Ladies.
Do you sing it or do you just say it?
No, I sing it. You can hear it at the beginning of this week's episode of my other podcast.
Oh, heck yeah.
Wow. I've got multiple things to look forward to.
Unlike Elle, I haven't tormented Maggie with that recently because she had no idea that I could do that and was flabbergasted.
That's great.
It has also probably been, it's been 1 week, but it's been probably 15 years, 20 years since I was doing anything with that.
Esther Perel is one of the keys to satisfying long-term relationships is retaining a push and pull of mystery. So you're just succeeding at that really well.